I have a client that I wrote a case study about, so I know this material has been released, and this isn't her real name, but we'll call her Emma. And she came to me. She was a therapist, and she was trying to lead grief groups, and she was crying. And so she's a therapist, and there's all these people in bereavement, and they start talking, and she starts crying. So the facility she was working with said, "You need to get some therapy," So she came in, and she had a great deal of loss, and so we went in with the music with her, and she had abuse issues as a small child, 2 and 3 years old, constantly abused by an uncle. She'd had a flood in her home when she was, I can't remember exactly how old, maybe a young teen or late, or just around 10 or something like that. I may have the years wrong, but her whole home was flooded and she had to leave her home. And so that was a trauma for her. All of her stuff was destroyed and they had to move to someplace else. Her way of life changed. She had a mother who was unstable emotionally. And then she came in and she had, her sister had died of cancer. She had recently lost her father. And although she had been talking to a verbal therapist, she hadn't really gone in. This is a very successful woman. This is a woman who had been a coach and had a successful coaching business before she went into being a therapist. I mean, she was dynamite, but here she was just breaking down. And so I like to think of that as her grief was leaking, that it was actually just leaking out of her. She couldn't contain it. When we have these things that are so difficult for us to contain, it takes so much energy to contain us. We're exhausted, So
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that way.
Yeah, you have to hold it down, control it. Whereas I'm all about, let's go in there and open up the thing and let the volcano go. So we did a lot of work. We worked for several years together. And one thing that, this was in an article about the inherent spiritual work that happens when you go inside with something like the body method and you're in these deep spaces and your spiritual life comes out. So she was raised Jewish and had just kind of dumped out and didn't know if she believed in God at all. And had basically, she worked with energy a little bit. She could send a grounding cord down and do energy work a little bit, but she really, her spiritual self just wasn't there. She had some really amazing imagery that she did, but I think her journey into herself with relieving, this is another thing that is really amazing about her, is that when you're Jewish, we carry, we have DNA, and that comes from our ancestors. And so in her, she carried, I'll just say, images started to come out. She'd have flash images in the experiences. Experiences are 30, 45 minutes long, where you're in the music that long. And she had flash experiences of things that really started to seem to me like she was reliving Holocaust scenes. Marching, uniforms, people putting you in line, these kind of imagery things. And she would go into those and come out, and when we were processing through the imagery afterwards, I'd say, well, what do you make of that? I don't know where that came from, So after quite a while of this, she, and she also had imagery, that was Christian imagery. She had a spirit guide that showed up as a reindeer.
Okay.
And she was like, what am I doing with a reindeer in my imagery? I'm Jewish. These are archetypal images that we all can share, images of God, images of war, images of mother, father. These are all archetypes. Just watch a Disney movie and you'll see all the archetypes.
Sure.
The villain, if you think about Lion King, that's things full of it. The trickster, Rafiki, and the hero's journey, all of the archetypal journeys that we think about. So she what was I going to talk about? Her religion. So she was coming up with these images that I was thinking to myself, these have got to be Holocaust images, And she finally owned it. and she was having these Christian images, and she went into hell and took care of her uncle, actually killed him in her imagery, went in with her animal guide, to take care of her abusive uncle. I was going, yeah, let's get that guy. It's just imagery, but somehow when we can conquer something that's hurt us so badly as an innocent child, it makes a difference. People don't always do it that way, but in order to move forward, sometimes you need to have a war, with a part of yourself or with someone who's hurt you. So she actually kept having images of ancestors and connecting with them. And she finally ended up with some imagery of God, and God was depicted as layers up above anything else, as a hobo tending a fire in a junkyard. And her work with around this hobo who was God was to clean him up, bring some other ancestors and guides in to clean him up, get him fresh clothes, get him some food, get him to lay down and have some sleep. And what came out of her imagery was that God isn't something that you ask. We ask everything of him, but truly, when we do good works in the world, we give God energy.
Wow.
It's like, it was just this whole mind-blowing imagery that came out. And after this, she kind of went back to temple, and she started getting more grounded in her life, because her spiritual questions were answered in the most creative, amazing way. And she later on, she's moved away now and I don't see her anymore, but later on she revisited the junkyard, and God was, had better clothes and things were better. And here she's a therapist, so she's doing good works in the world, and God is getting better. And I just think that's mind-blowing. That's life-changing, transitional, personality-changing, belief-changing imagery that took her a long time to grasp. And when she finally did go in and have a whole session about that Holocaust type of imagery, she was also able to conquer that and to come to grips with it, to not let it be a shadow that was, haunting her, but to have her conquer it and to be in charge of it and to heal it, to heal those hurts. So, her whole, I've written about her case because it just was so incredible in this article I wrote about spirituality. Because my work is not about, there are counselors and therapists who are religious Christian counselors. I'm not that. I'm like, wherever your psyche needs to go, I'm going to support it because it's the inherent human, good old Carl Rogers, how we grow in a healthy way. If we're allowed to, we will always grow, and so she, with all of that opened up, was able to grow and come out alive. She's working just fine now and is in a much more functioning type of a place. And that's what it is about transition. Not to interrupt you, but when we're bullied by transition, or we're not able to accept it, we're not able to function.
Right.
And not being able to function is part of the definition of having mental illness.